Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie recounts his relationship with his wife, whom he adored and cared for deeply, only to discover her infidelity after 2 years of marriage. He cleverly exposes her cheating by inviting her boyfriend to a family dinner, leading to their humiliation and breakup. Despite his heartbreak, he resolves to move on, acknowledging the need for healing before pursuing another relationship. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I were married for 2 years before I discovered she had been fooling me. First, I'll admit that I loved my wife so much, and even when I noticed signs that she was acting edgy or dressing extra, I didn't consider most of it. My wife and I first met at a mutual friend's housewarming party and clicked instantly. We had a couple of conversations, talked about regular things, what she loved and what I loved, and she was very free-spirited. She laughed at almost every joke, which I found beautiful and attractive. I also loved that she was not acting like she was out of my league like the rest of her friends did, and after we had a great time together, we went our separate ways. But before we did, we exchanged contacts, and I called her as soon as I got home that evening. We didn't talk much that first night because she went to a different location to hang out with her friends, but the next day we talked and flowed like old-time friends. I won't lie, I wasn't single when I met my wife. My relationship was complicated, and I was going through so much with my then-girlfriend. I was tired of her lies, her deception, and always playing the victim in situations she made, which was exhausting for me. So, when my then-girlfriend asked that we break up, I didn't argue with her. I did this because I was already close friends with my wife, and she looked like the kind of woman that would give me the long-lasting peace I wanted, and I was right. My wife gave me the kind of peace, love, and respect I wanted, but it was short-lived. After I have found my wife, I will be going to the hospital. Officially broke up, my wife was there to comfort me and spend time with me whenever she wanted to. She was a freelance graphic designer, and this gave her the flexibility to work from anywhere. I'd even invite her for the weekends, and she would work from my place. And whenever she was taking a break, we'd go out and have fun. As of that time, she was single and was looking to have fun. Aside from her 2 friends I met at the housewarming party, she didn't have other friends and didn't have much of a social life. So we became best friends, and in no time, we were madly in love with each other. Even without officially asking her out, we were almost inseparable and went everywhere together all the time. You all might call it obsession, but it wasn't. I had been yearning for a woman I could connect with and not feel insecure, and I found that in my wife. We introduced each other to our parents, and my parents loved her. She was my maternal grandmother's namesake, creating a beautiful bond between her and my mother. I had a great job and the pay was great, but as a freelancer, she earned more than me and I was cool with that. Despite her earning more than I did, I still took care of her. We dated for 2 years. Those were the most memorable moments we had together. We traveled to different countries, mainly for sightseeing, and took 2 proper vacations within those 2 years. While we dated, my love for her and my gifting increased. On our first anniversary, I felt we were ready to take things to the next level. So I asked her to move in with me, and she was glad to. Her parents even suggested that she move in with me at the early stage of our relationship so we could get to know each other, but she refused and said she didn't want to rush things. I literally did not hold back anything from my wife. Nothing at all. I loved her wholeheartedly and did everything to make her happy. Her happiness was my priority and I adored everything about her. I believe we were on our way to the happily ever after life, but I was very mistaken. After 2 years of dating and 1 year of living together, I popped the question and she said yes. We had a small wedding, invited our friends and family, and had a great time. We didn't need to move into a bigger apartment, so we stayed at my old house. We didn't do 50-50 responsibility, but she contributed to it. I took care of rent, gas and utility bills, and she took care of groceries. Remember that I mentioned at the beginning of my story that there was a time I noticed some things were off with my wife, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Well, that started after a year in our marriage. She just changed and I could not explain why. On some days, she would be happy and all nice. The next day, she would be so cold and ignore me like we didn't live in the same house. Then she started going out more and more from being someone who didn't have friends and a solid social life. I would often return from work, and she would leave a note that said she was out to see her friends or hang out with other freelancers that lived in our city. The truth is I was happy that she was even socializing more, and I didn't really ask detailed questions whenever she returned for her meetings. As time passed, I noticed she started caring more about her looks, applying makeup and wearing skin-tight skimpy clothes. I was a bit concerned about the skimpy clothes she wore, and each time I talked about it, she would say I was being insecure and I didn't like that she was exploring different options. I didn't like it when she said that, so I stopped mentioning it and allowed her to do her thing. She even started staying late whenever she went out in the evenings, and I felt she needed to unwind after sitting in front of her laptop for hours. Our bond as husband and wife also became weaker as all of this continued, and most times she wouldn't let me touch her because she claimed she was always tired, and I tried to be an understanding husband. Not knowing that my wife was cheating on me. It was until one day. We were both sitting in the living room and she mentioned something about having insufficient space on her phone, and I advised her to clear/clean her phone. As she was doing that, in a short glance at her screen, I noticed she recently deleted a dating app, and I was curious. I tried to hold myself together and pretended I did not see everything. Later that evening, after giving her a hot dose of my husband's duties, she slept off, and I used her fingerprint to unlock her phone as she slept. I re-downloaded the app, and because her details were registered with Google, I got signed in immediately. I didn't even dig deep when I found out that my wife had been dating one not-so-fine guy for almost a year, and he had seen me a couple of times. I read all of their romantic conversations, and I was heartbroken to see that they mocked me whenever they talked and said many nasty things about me. I was so enraged and even thought of giving my wife a peaceful sleep, but I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. So I pretended to chat with him, like it was my wife, and invited her boyfriend to join us for Christmas dinner in a few days so he could meet my family, still pretending to be my wife. I told him I would travel, so we would have the whole evening to ourselves. After he agreed, I deleted the app, charged my wife's phone, and pretended all was well. In fact, I acted happier than I was the previous days, and she believed I was excited about Christmas. Long story short, on Christmas Eve, he arrived at my in-laws' home, and it was my turn to make a fool out of them. I knew the exact time he would come and open the door for him. The shock on his face was worth framing, and I pretended I didn't know him. When my wife saw him, she dropped the tray of food she was holding, and her parents suspected something was wrong. Her parents didn't know him either, but he was invited to the table to eat with us. As I ate, I began talking about a friend who recently found out his wife was cheating on him on a dating app, and he was mad and divorced her. I made the story so emotional. Her parents even said the lady did not deserve a second chance and her husband did the right thing by divorcing her. While I told the story, it was evident that my wife was finding it difficult to chew and swallow the food in her mouth, and she was sweating profusely. Her boyfriend kept touching the collar of his shirt, and it was evident that he was uncomfortable too after beating around the bush. I told her parents that their daughter was cheating on me with the man she invited for dinner, and her parents questioned her, and they were so furious when they confirmed it. They embarrassed her boyfriend without wasting time and kicked him out of their house. Then they rained abuse on my wife, and they expressed their disappointment. I'm glad. She will have to live with her parents' disappointment for the rest of her life. And she has no place in my life anymore. She tried to defend herself and said she did it because I was getting boring, and I did everything she wanted without complaints. Hearing this made her parents more furious, and they asked her to find somewhere else to sleep that day. I was so shattered that she could repay me that way, and I left their house. Later on, we divorced, and I have not seen her since. It's funny how you pour your heart out for a woman, care for her, and love her unconditionally. In the end, she takes advantage of that. Right now, I'm not ready for a relationship, and it might take a while to heal. Today's second story. In this story, Opie recounts a tumultuous breakup with his girlfriend of 5 years. She pursued a spontaneous plan to travel, arranging to sublet their apartment without his consent. Caught kissing the potential subletter, she is confronted and ultimately dumped. He leaves abruptly, taking his belongings and dog. Later, he reports her and her new partner for workplace policy violations. Despite pleas, he resolves to move forward and embrace happiness. Now let's get into the story. My girlfriend and I were together for 5 years, living together the whole time. She needed somewhere to go when we met, so she moved in as my roommate for a few days. But then we slept together and our relationship began. We both enjoyed going for walks, having friends over for board games, and volunteering at a local stable that offered therapeutic riding. A lot of our time was spent there, working together. At least once a week, we took our basset hound on our memorized hiking trail through the valley and over the mountains. Over the years, we formed a close bond and enjoyed living with each other. I was thankful that starting a romance with my roommate didn't come back to haunt me, but I wasn't considering the possibility of change. At the time, I felt like we could always stay like this. She started to get restless, though. It seemed like her head was in the clouds because she started talking about getting a van and traveling across the country. We didn't have the money to do that without dipping into our hard-earned savings, and without staying to work, we'd fall behind on our bills. When I told her this, she suggested we sublet our apartment. She wouldn't let go of the idea, even though I didn't like it. I didn't trust a stranger to stay in her home, keep it nice, pay us, and leave whenever we got back. It just felt like something was going to go wrong. Unbeknownst to me, my girlfriend was arranged to meet a potential subletter. She met him without me, for God knows how long while I was at work. They met alone in the apartment. When she told me this, I was furious. I told her she was lucky he didn't try anything while I wasn't there. How stupid do you have to be to meet a stranger in your home without your spouse there? She swore nothing weird or bad happened, and he seemed like a responsible, honest renter. He even worked in the same building as her. I couldn't believe this, but I decided to go along with my girlfriend. She wanted us to buy a van and go on a trip so bad it was like her life depended on it. So, I got off work early one day and bought a van for us. I got her flowers and a card that basically said she could tell the subletter to move in, and I'd love nothing more than to travel with her. As I drove through the parking lot, I saw her leaving the rental office with a man I assumed to be the subletter. They were smiling ear to ear and then kissed passionately. I had to jerk the wheel to avoid clipping a parked car. This was supposed to be our subletter, and I just caught my girlfriend kissing him. I hadn't even told her I was ready to do this. She just went ahead and did it anyway. I was furious and shaking when I got out of the van, holding the flowers and card carelessly. My girlfriend noticed me, and her face went from pleased and happy to scared. She rushed over to me, asking if this was our new van. One look at AP, and I instantly got the feeling that he thought too highly of himself, had a lot of money, and didn't care that he was kissing my woman and intruding on my life. I told her it was my new van because I just saw her kissing our subletter. AP gave us space while she tried to downplay what I just saw. I told her there was no excuse for it and threw the flowers and card at her. She picked it up, started reading it, and then sobbing. It was like the card, van, and me standing in front of her snapped her out of whatever delusion she was feeding herself. She said she didn't know what came over her. She just wanted to travel with me and make the subletter official. I mocked her for sounding like an idiot. That's all she wanted. Yet she met him alone in our apartment twice, and I caught them kissing. In so many words, I dumped her. We fought back and forth while AP sat in his car, but I don't remember what we said. I just remember how betrayed I felt. My girlfriend got smart with me when she realized I wouldn't forgive her for this. She said she didn't have to leave because her name was on the lease, but that she would give me some space to get over what just happened. I watched her get into AP's car and leave. I went inside the apartment in some kind of zombie-like trance and felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't want to be here anymore, and I couldn't stay with my girlfriend after how she just defended herself for seeing another man. I looked at the van I just bought and decided what I was going to do. I packed all my stuff, everything, and fitted into the van. I divided it into my essentials, stuff to sell and stuff to keep. I put my apartment key under the mat, carried my basset hound to the van, and left. 2 weeks later, I remembered my ex saying that AP worked in the same building as her. It wasn't hard to find the information I needed and send an email to my ex's boss. She replied less than a week later, thanking me for bringing this violation of company policy to her attention. AP and my ex were fired for dating in the workplace. She tries calling me and texting me pitiful cheater words, but I know she was just one of the many people I'm destined to meet. She wasn't even mad at me for getting her fired. She just wanted me to come home. As much as her betrayal hurt, she was the one that encouraged me to buy the van and travel. I hope anybody reading my story doesn't let anyone or anything hold you back from being happy or content with life.